Hello and good morning. It's nice to see everybody. Well, we really can't see you, but we know you're there, and so it's good to have you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Gretchen Batra. I'm a volunteer with the Fraud Watch Network, and today we're having our first of 6 webinars. There's a series of webinars that we've put together on the for taxes today, but coming up will be webinars on cyber fraud, banking, investment fraud. We're even going to do a little dip into the dark web. So stay tuned for more of these events. Today, my guests are Lynette Lee Villanueva, and she's the Vice President of the Tax Aid with the AARP Foundation, and also Rosa Maimie, and she's the a senior advisor with the AARP Tax Aid program, which both come under the foundation. Before we get started, if you have comments or questions, there's a place on your screen where you can put those in, and then we will see them and be able to get back to you. So, Lynette, tell us, before we get into the fraud part of this, a bit about tax aid, and then if you'd like to, I'm sure you would, how COVID has affected the whole program, because I know it has a big impact.
Right. Yes, it has, Gretchen. So first, just thank you for having us here today. It's always, a pleasure to join with you, to be able to talk a little bit about tax aid, and also to be able to give tips for people to be able to warn them against fraud things that they to protect themselves from. So with tax aid, we are now in the tax season. So, but tax aid is a program of the AARP Foundation. It is the largest volunteer-based free tax preparation service in the country. So we are proud of that. We are proud of our volunteers who come back every year to be able to provide this service in their community. So right now, nationally, we have over 36,000 volunteers across the country, and nearly 5,000 sites in communities across the country. So some of the things that we have, last year was a difficult year. In the middle of the tax season, in the middle of March, we had to suspend service and say it's no longer safe for us to be out there in person at sites. So the whole year was about pivoting and about being able to provide services. We were able to quickly stand up a free tax service option, and a self-preparation option for taxpayers to use. And then we also were able to open a few sites by the end of the tax season. So then as we work toward 2021, what we have available this year is a mixture of different types of service options. From our traditional in-person, where it's safe, we will have some sites that are open if the COVID conditions allow for that to be, to take place. And they'll be modified, of course, to be able to have safety precautions in place, to have, the personal protection, equipment. So we are requiring masks to be worn, and just the distancing between the volunteers and the taxpayers. And then we also have some services for what we're calling low contact, where you'll be able to come in, have your tax documents either scanned in and then prepared while you're not there. We'll scan it into our software, and then the volunteer will prepare it, and then you'll come back and pick it up at another time and review the return. And also an option for some sites to be able to actually physically take the hard copy documents, catalog them, and be able to have them again. You'll drop them off, catalog them, and then come back at another day to pick them up once you return. And then we also have the contact free, where those who are more virtually able to scan their own documents in and electronically transmit them to us. We will take those documents, a volunteer will prepare the return, and we'll contact you virtually. So either through a web conference or via telephone, you'll be able to have your interview and talk with them about your tax things. So those are some of the options. We also still have our self-preparation option, but we'll be having a website that will go live on the 12th of or the 9th, I'm sorry, the 9th of February. We'll be able to go to aarp.foundation.org /taxaid, and you'll be able to find out the options in your area. So sorry it was a long answer, Gretchen, but that's what we're doing, and we thank you for letting us be able to get the word out about it.
Well, I know you've had to be extremely creative, and as I talk to friends around the country who are volunteers, they've told me everything from people being in their cars to, and I know where I live, we've been a tax aid site, and unfortunately, we're kind of in lockdown, so they're doing some internally, but the creativity is amazing. And the other thing I want to say is how the accuracy rate of the tax aid volunteers is it's just phenomenal. It's something to be so proud of, and we all of us that are affiliated some way or other with tax aid just find it so exciting. So let's dig into the issues of the fraud. How do fraudsters get? I mean, we're clutching all our pieces of paper. How in the world do the fraudsters get to us, or do they get to us before we even do anything with our information? Rosa, I think that's an area that you have dug into a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to extend my thanks too. Glad we could be here today. The frauds that happen during tax time are very similar to other frauds. It's just that the target is different, meaning you're during tax time. So these are going to sound familiar. What I'll do is talk a little bit about maybe the top 3 or 4 that we know of, and then if we want to, we can dig into prevention and reporting and that kind of thing as well. But the ones that we most likely see during this time, one is a long-standing one, the IRS imposter scam, right? So you may have seen this imposters in other realms as well, but in this case, someone will pretend to be an IRS official and they'll try and get you to send them money, right? They may do this by a phone call, a threatening phone call, or it could be an email, or it could be a text. Text is a big platform now for these scams. And they may use fake names, bogus IRS identification badges to make it look like they are an IRS employee. The victims will be told they're owed money. The IRS has to be paid promptly. And then they'll ask you to provide personal information like your social security number, or bank account, or other information so that you can use that to pay up. So that's
sometimes when they want money immediately, they have you go get a gift cards.
That's
and
exactly
the minute
right.
You hear gift cards, you know it's fraud.
Absolutely. And the IRS is not going to call you that way out of the blue. I mean, usually there's some sort of a relationship that's already started by mail, most likely, by paper mail.
They're not coming to your door either, are they? Do they ever come to your door?
I've heard instances of imposters, whether it's IRS or otherwise, trying to get your information, but it's they will find a lot of doors, so to speak, to come through, whether it's digital or your actual physical door to come and find you. In fact, I remember a few years ago when I was working with the Federal Trade Commission in a different job with AARP, we helped them in terms of this long-running fraud scheme. Where there was a call center in India, right, who was using information from data brokers. They're basically buying data to find potential victims, and older Americans were really the target on those. So luckily, the FTC and the feds shut them down, at least that center. There are probably others that have popped up since. Another is something that's a little more recent in terms of the frauds that we're seeing is kind of a ghost preparer. Have you ever heard of ghosting, where maybe you've got a relationship with someone and then they've disappeared, whatever realm or industry that might be in, where there are unethical tax return preparers who can put up a shingle, not a lot of regulation there to check them out. And they will, it's more than a paperwork problem, right? They will gather your information, fill out a form for you. Sometimes they've been known to put in their own bank account information, right? So that the refund will go into that fake preparer's account. One of the things you do is do your research, find out, who you're dealing with, go to reputable tax preparers like TaxAid, that's free, or other paid preparers that are reputable. But that's something that's coming up a little bit more often, where people just kind of start a business and they're not real. Another is the good old ID theft, right? But there's
ID. What's ID?
Identification. So tax identification, right? Theft. And that's where someone gets personal information, and it's easy to get now, online or you can try and do your best to protect your information. You should continue to do that, but there is a lot of information that's already out there. They'll obtain your social security number. All they need is your social security number and date of birth and some other contact information, and they can fill out a form being you, whoever the you is. And the thing with that is that they probably file as soon as possible. And a lot of times the victim is not aware that that's happened until they file, right? And then they find that someone else has already filed as you. So that's a really stealthy one, right? Because they go in early. So one of the pieces of advice, obviously, is to file as early as possible, right? Get in there early. The other new scam, which is very new, is around stimulus payments, right? You know that there's been one round of stimulus payments, a second, possibly more. The IRS refers to them as EIPs, right? Economic impact payments. And that's basically the fraudsters will get in touch with you and say, well, you haven't gotten your stimulus payment yet. Work with me, give me a fee. I can get it for you faster. I can do all of the legwork, all of the paperwork, if there is paperwork. And sometimes these are coming in not just via email, but more so via text. It seems to be the way these are coming in. And then there's the old-fashioned, if there's a check or some piece of paper that's available, it gets stolen. So those are kind of the new and long-term types of fraudulent behavior that we see over time related to taxes.
Mm-hmm. So on these tax preparers, do they just hang up a shingle, or do they have to be certified and pass tests and all of that sort of thing before they can be a tax preparer?
Well, they do need to be, and I may ask Lynette to jump in around the certification, but in terms of, it's easy to put up a shingle, and by a shingle, it could literally be a sign on the front of a building, but it could be a fake website, right? Or a website that has information that's fraudulent about their background and their experience. But why don't I turn it over to Lynette to talk about kind of how a tax preparer might get certified.
Right. So I'll start with TaxAid, because our program, that's the one thing you can be reliant on with the volunteer programs, whether it's TaxAid or whether it's other programs that usually go by the name of VITA. But though all of our volunteers must actually take training every single year and pass an IRS certification test before they can prepare returns. So by coming to one of the volunteer sites, an AARP Foundation TaxAid site, you can be guaranteed that the volunteer that you are interacting with has received training that year on the current tax law and has also passed a test on the current tax law to be able to do it. But outside of the volunteer programs and with many of the paid preparers, and I'm not saying that all of them, but of course, there's the large, corporate, ones, the H&R Blocks and all of those that do provide training. But a lot of the mom and pop shops, they don't need to have any direct training in order to hang up that shingle. So you just need to be, do your due diligence and be able to look online about any reputations that they might have and reviews that they might have, just to be certain that you're dealing with somebody who is current on the tax law. And there's been tax law changes in the past year, and there's also a lot of questions out right now about what needs to be done with if you received economic payment. Maybe you didn't receive your full economic stimulus payment, and you need to true that up on your tax return, which is allowed for this year. So there's those type of questions, and our volunteers have been trained to handle those.
Yeah, I know when I talk to friends in January and I say, well, what have you been reading lately? Like what books? And they say, oh, I'm reading the tax laws right now. So yeah, I mean, they really study a lot. So I know it's very serious. Rosa, you said something about pieces of paper, and I was just thinking about the mail.
Yeah.
We are really encourage people not to put important papers if they have an outside mailbox, to put anything important in their mailbox, but take it to an inside box at the post office or someplace where the box is inside, and even not using the blue box outside the post office, because there's scammers that can fish in, and they literally stick bottles down on strings that are sticky, and they can pull up things because it sticks to those. So we're saying be really careful with anything to do with finances, and I think you alluded to that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think people forget about that in this day and age of technology, right? We all worry about what is it that's out on the internet, which we should, and not to give out information online and to protect your information. But there's the good old fashioned, make sure you shred your stuff. Don't put it in an open trash can. Don't leave stuff on a copier machine, which we've heard about, where someone is, making a copy of their W-2 and left it there. Real simple things that you just make sure you protect your personal information. Don't give out your address, your birth date, social security number. Online, don't click on attachments in an email. Don't routinely carry around your social security card or that of a family member. And look closely at websites. Don't enter your personal financial information on a website unless you're absolutely sure that website is legit. I remember a few years ago, I got something that took me to a website that said American Express, and the spelling had 3 S's on the end, right, of the URL, American Express. So just make sure. Look out for use of public Wi-Fi networks, all those things. But just protect your information, but don't forget the old-fashioned way as well.
Right. And also, we're encouraged to change our passwords every so often, and not use the same password, especially around anything related to financial matters.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've listed some of the ways people can protect themselves around taxes and fraud. Are there other things that people can do?
Well, I would say, if we're talking about, for example, the imposter scam, I know a lot of folks want to be nice and stay on the phone with folks who call, and that's, the imposter scam usually is a phone conversation, is kind of the way that started as a scam. Just hang up. There's no reason to stay on the phone with them. Consider asking for identification, of whether you're talking to someone on the phone, or if you're now there's a lot of screen sharing types of formats going on for financial information. You be careful with that. Don't confirm your personal information over the phone. Don't respond to a purported IRS email. Don't, as you said, don't pay a tax bill with a prepaid debit card. If you talk about debit cards or wire transfers, that is a total red flag. Be careful with that. Don't assume a caller who tells you to verify his or her phone number by checking the IRS website where it's on the level. I mean, and also this goes with any kind of fraudulent thing. I got a call from my mother the other day, actually, interestingly enough. She was an independent care facility, but she got a call where someone said, "Hey, is this grandma?" Now, I'm her only child, and I have no children, so it was very obvious for her. But they try and there's this thing of trying to have a relationship with the fraudster and the victim. So don't engage. Think about who you're talking to.
Yeah, I think a lot of those things that you alluded to, fraudsters get us by what we call putting you in the ether. Either
Right.
they do something that makes you feel excited, like, oh, you're going to get a tax refund, and we need to have your bank account number so we can put it in. So you get excited, and it's happy news. So you give out information, or they threaten you, and they'll, like this thing about, you owe this money, it's got to be paid immediately. I don't care if it's a weekend, you go get gift cards and give me the information. I mean, they scare you to death. So
Right.
they grab your emotions, and that's true for all fraud, but certainly we've all gotten those calls from the IRS that and I haven't ever talked to any of them, so I don't know what they say, or what they, are they threatening, or are they got some joyful news. But have you ever talked to, any of them?
Yeah, actually, I've gotten calls myself. Interestingly enough, I don't know if it was because I used to work on fraud stuff in a prior job at AARP, but I got a voicemail that was left on my AARP work phone from someone saying they were with the IRS, and was able to track back and actually use that as an example for folks that it wasn't real, but it was a voicemail, and it was pretty threatening, and interestingly enough, and I know this isn't quite around taxes, but it also may have to do with affinity groups, where I guess somehow they had some background about who I am or who I was, or looked at the name or whatever, and started to, the threatening information was not just around owing taxes, but around taking away a driver's license or immigration status, or those types of things were also coming up as part of the threats. And that's something that's very common. Yeah.
When you said affinity groups, explain that a little bit. What does that mean?
Yeah, affinity groups, and that's another type of fraud, and this is kind of getting a little away from kind of the tax fraud piece, but could be incorporated, is where you belong to a certain group, and you may be defrauded based on a relationship that either comes through that group, or, like you said, getting you into the ether, becoming friendly because you're a member or kind of have an affinity with that group, whether it's you're part of a church group, or you're part of a certain ethnicity like I am, or you are part of a community that you all are in the same neighborhood and you belong to a book club or something like that, where someone can, whether they're part of that group or they promote to that group, can become part of, can again, get some kind of emotional or other type of connection or common connection, that we're friends, or we speak the same language, or that kind of thing. The Bernie Madoff was started as can be thought of as an affinity fraud as well, among other things. So
yeah, so with taxes, somehow they might wiggle in. Yeah, Lynette.
I was just going to say, Gretchen, I think we have a couple of questions from viewers. If if Rebecca wants to put them, she's putting it up.
Okay, I'm just trying to find questions. Post the question, thanks.
So the one question that's on the screen right now that from Bud is, are the tax preparers at stores like Walmart certified? So I can actually take that question. So Walmart has contracts with a couple of the big preparers. I'm not exactly sure who it is. This year it has transferred. So I would say that they are definitely legitimate preparers. I don't know what those companies, what type of training they put their preparers through. I can't speak to that, but that they are one of the big. So the big three that you will often hear about is H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, and Liberty, and they're national chains of preparers, paid preparers, and yes, they should know about the current tax laws. But I also encourage you that if you have a tax aid site near you to please avail yourself of that. It is a free service, so it will save you that tax preparation fee that you would be paying to those other companies. And we're here to serve you. It's all by volunteers, and this is what they do. Many of them study and are so immersed in tax law that that's their hobby almost in retirement is the tax law. So we know that we have qualified preparers.
Mm-hmm. And I see another question here regarding passwords. Do you consider sites like LastPass safe to use? I mean, I would say it's based on the user. We wouldn't, as an organization, endorse any one type of product. And I'm not familiar with this one, but even if I were, we would not necessarily do that. I would say for things like this, and there are others that I know of, if you feel like you need the help in remembering passwords or organizing passwords, and you feel like it's a legitimate service, and if you want to pay the cost for it, that is up to you. Just make sure that it is legit and you feel it's safe, and look at recommendations and maybe the Better Business Bureau, and just make sure you do your research around them. I would say use it if you feel like you need it. If you don't need it and can do it in a way that you can feel comfortable doing it on your own, then that's something you can do as well.
A couple of episodes ago, our editions, ARP magazine talked about using a password manager. They did mention LastPass and a couple of others that were good. But again, follow Rose's advice about do your research. Okay, here's another question. Is it better to electronic file versus sending a paper filing via the post office?
I personally say yes, it is. Actually, all of the ARP Foundation tax aid sites, we only electronic file unless there's a specific reason why that return cannot be electronically filed. And there are a couple of instances when a piece of paper, like a power of attorney or something, needs to be accompany it. But we do only electronically file. And this provides, it is safer for you. It also it helps you get your refund faster if you do a refund, or it just speeds up that processing, and you can be sure that you will have that it is in a safe environment. Mm-hmm.
It cuts down on paper, right? Save the environment a little more. Well, it looks like we're getting close to the end here, and I'm just trying to see if there are any more questions. Anybody see any other questions that have come up?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I want people to come back to another seminar about fraud, and the next one will be in 2 weeks at the same time on Wednesdays at 10:30, and after that, we'll have 4 more. So we're having a total of 6. So the next one is on cyber fraud on the 17th and at 10:30. So I hope you'll tune in. And I thank you, Lynette and Rosa, so very much. You've given us a lot of very valuable information. And I know people will be eager to come to get help from the tax aid volunteers. And I want to say thank you to Rebecca, who's doing all the technology in the background to help us do these webinars. So thanks a lot, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. And hopefully, Lynette and Rosa, I'll see you again at some point down the road.
Yes. Thank you for
very
having us.
much.